I'm Laura, I'm an addict. I asked Nat now, she was like, what do you mean? I just wanted to do it a little bit differently because I know for me when I sit in these rooms, often it takes me a little while to ground myself and to find my feet, because whenever I walk into a meeting, I'm a little bit nervous and a little bit anxious, even after all these years. So can I ask whoever has it to please read We Do Recover?
Everyone, my name is Jess and I'm an addict.
Jess.
We do recover. When at the end of the road we find that we can no longer function as a human being, either with or without drugs, we all face the same dilemma. What is there left to do? It seems to be this alternative, either go on as best as we can to the bitter end, jails, institutions, or dead, or find a new way to live. In years gone by, very few addicts ever had this last choice. Those who are addicted today are more fortunate. For the first time in man's entire history, a simple way to improving himself in the lives of many addicts. It is available to us all. This is a simple, spiritual, not religious program known as Narcotics Anonymous.
Thanks, Jess. So I know that that's not usual, but there's nothing usual about me. But that preamble literally saved my life. When I had reached the end of my journey in active addiction to substance, it was that preamble that got me through the days leading up to me going to treatment for the final time. I think just based on that, and also the Just for Today reading, surprisingly, I spent my whole life feeling different, feeling just disconnected from everything and everyone. As a little girl, I used to go and escape in the garden and just, I was so happy in my isolation and in my solitude. I was always quite bubbly and outgoing, and I always had friends and stuff, but I loved my own company because I could just escape through my imagination or whatever it was. And the struggles, my early struggles as a child, were all based on that. My inability to feel connection to other people, my inability to just be okay. I was always trying to get approval or seek approval or something, whether it was from my mom or teachers or friends. I can remember very, very distinctively. I think I was in grade 2 or something, and the kids would come back from the weekend and they'd be like, oh, we went and saw this movie, have you seen it? And I would lie and be like, yeah, I've seen it. I had not. And then I prayed and hoped that they didn't ask me questions about the movie. So the lying, because I wanted to be like them, I wanted to also have seen that movie. I would tidy up my room and call my mom like it was an event, look at what I did, give me approval, give me praise, and whether that was a lack of, her affirming me as a small child or not, when I look at it, the behavior and the thinking and the pressure that I put on myself as a young girl to be something, to be seen, to be heard, to be approved, to be okay, it's not normal. It never was normal. And then, my fuck it switch, as I've heard it described, that switched really young for me. I was I don't know, I always thought that I was a mediocre everything. I could do everything if I applied myself, but I never, because of the pressure I put on myself, my fear of success, we often talk about the fear of failure. I'm not scared of failure. I know failure. If anything, I'll start things just to fail because I know that that's familiar to me. I know how to fail. And I never pushed myself. My journey with substance began at 9, which is ridiculous. Like, I look at my son as 7, and as I've watched him, and I look at my friends' kids and they're all around that age, and I'm like, what? what must have been so wrong with me that at the age of 9, I was like, this is a good idea. Let's get high. And I did, and I loved it. I loved it. We were on holiday, family holiday, at the beach in Belito, and I was huffing thinners through a towel on the beach, hallucinating my ass off, and I loved it. You know, it felt like home. It felt awesome, you know, because there was no effort involved in trying to not be there. Because you know, even though I was so little, I never wanted to be anywhere. I remember sitting on the carpet during story time at school, and I'm in a group of kids, and the teacher's reading, and I felt like I was in this bubble, completely separate from everybody else, and they all were together, and I was just this alien. Yeah, from that moment on, you know, my mom always kept some thinners in the fridge for her nail polishes or her Tipex or whatever it was. And I would go and sneak it out of the fridge and go and get high in my bedroom by myself at the age of 9. You know, my mom was a smoker, and my dad hated her smoking inside the house, my stepdad. And so she would light a cigarette outside the kitchen and leave it on the kitchen window rail. And I would go outside and I would have 2 drags of her cigarette at the age of 9. You know, stealing as well. So the lying, the stealing. You know, I would steal toys from my friends' houses, you know, because I liked the Barbie dress that she had. So I would steal it. Take money out of my mom's purse. And I was brought up in a home where I never needed for anything. You know, I went to good schools, and we were quite well off. We were also taught, though, the importance of working for what you get. You know, I never just got handed anything. If I wanted to go out with my friends, I'd have to wash the car for, 3 consecutive weekends and do the dishes. And, you know, my lack of morals only came in the deeper I got into my addiction. It was always given to me, and I was taught how to be a lady and how to be responsible, and I was given a really good opportunity to have a great life or a great foundation. But from the moment I found substance, that was when I started running from Laura, the Laura that I had no idea. I don't think a 9-year-old knows who they are, but, you know. And I loved it. I loved being this little rebel child. The negative affirmation was affirmation enough, and I could own it. I was a little shit. I was very clever in school. You know, I didn't have to study. I didn't have to try. I just passed everything. So there was no real consequence there where my parents put the reins on me to not go out and not go jawling and not da-da-da-da-da, because I was producing really good reports. This obviously got into other substances, more hallucinogenics and things that you smoke, and I found alcohol and all of that, all in primary school. And that was just what I did. You know, I went to school to socialize with friends, and I had boyfriends, and I started off really young. I didn't have a childhood. And the holiday between primary school and going into high school was where I first tried harder street drugs. And I'd had 2 events happen to me prior to that. I was raped twice, both date rapes, people that I didn't know, and I kind of just went with it. I was like, fuck this. Everything was just fuck this. So there I was, beginning of high school, already joining, putting things up my nose and getting fucked every weekend. I then became quite promiscuous because I had already, it just kind of happened that way, I guess. And it's only now, later on in my recovery, that I've had to look at my patterns with men as well, because it started back then as well. It was not just about substance, it was about relationships. I latched onto having a partner, having somebody there as a sense of, wholeness. So the two kind of always were hand in hand. Now I'm jumping backwards, my biological father died to this disease, only much later on, but he was an absent entity in my life. We were very, very close. I think we just, even though I had no idea about recovery and I had no real definition of addiction either, I got it. Like, I understood. I was never angry with him for being an addict. I was never angry with him for not being there. I kind of just accepted it and got it. And then my mom married my stepdad, who adopted me. So my stepdad raised me, and he's still a part of my life today. And I'm very grateful for him. And my biological father was just always there in the background. But I think those abandonment issues and rejection issues and whatever it was, those were there. And then obviously with the sexual abuse as well, it did something to my brain, where I think a normal person would have somehow gotten on with it, and I just rolled with it. I always had a long-term boyfriend. Throughout high school, I had 2 boyfriends, and there was no gap between. I had a boyfriend for a year and a half, and I had a boyfriend for 3.5 years, and I always had a partner. And it was just get high, go clubbing, go jawling. I learned to hustle at a very young age, because obviously I was a kid. I didn't have money, so I hustled. I matured physically quite young as well, so I looked a lot older. I had the arrogance, so I made it happen. And I got a real kick out of just being the bad girl. I got kicked out of my first high school. Well, politely told that we don't think this school is suited for your daughter. At the same time that I ended up in a psychiatric unit for the first time, I was 14, for a drug-induced psychosis, because I literally took whatever I could. I just shoved it in, and I went into psychosis at 14. And it was a jolt, because now I had psychiatrists telling me there is something wrong with you. Hello, my darling. Sorry, guys, this is going to happen. Can you go outside, please? Take your biscuits outside. Take them outside quickly. 1, 2, quickly. Sorry. I had psychiatrists telling me, there is something wrong with you. Of course, I denied that there was any substance, that I wasn't using anything. And they wanted to label me this and label me that, and then the medication came, and the ridiculous stuff I told these psychiatrists. I even at some stage got the psychiatrist to prescribe lorazepam injections, and I was literally just drooling, and I loved it, because I wasn't there. I found my drug of choice at 15, but I didn't use it again until a little while after. And I first started smoking because that was okay. I always had, I talk about this moral compass thing. I always had a sense of, well, at least I'm not doing this. At least I'm not doing that. But at the same time, my fuck everything was as strong. So when the opportunity came and someone was like, smoke this, I was like, okay. For a brief moment in my head, there was you can't do that or you shouldn't do that. But it was so quick that I could never latch onto that. The first time anybody ever offered me anything, I took it. I dropped out of school at that time as well for a little while. And my mom and stepdad had separated. And he caught wind that I wasn't at school. And he quickly put me back into school. And I missed a whole year, half of grade 9 and half of grade 10. I was fucked. But I wasn't at school. And they pushed me into grade 10. I missed a whole year, and I didn't have to repeat anything. So that was awesome for me, because my ego, I would not have finished school had they put me back a year, because I'm not sitting with children who are younger than me. Fuck that. That was what where my head was. And I don't know how I finished school. I was never there. Like I said, I had a boyfriend, a much older boyfriend, and I stayed with him most of the time. First time my mom kicked me out, I was 12. And I went and stayed with my gran, and then I pretty much couch surfed the rest of school. I was always at somebody's house with some excuse. And my mom, I don't understand it. Like, I look at it, my mom she's so disciplined. I look at my sisters and how they listened. I didn't. I rebelled. And I don't know how. I really don't know how, but I did. Like I said, I have no idea how I finished school. I wasn't there, and when I was fucked. My matric exams, I remember I was so out of it that I passed out on the table, and the teachers had written a note for me to stay there afterwards. I didn't even have school socks on. I just had school shoes on. And I went to, it was a good school in Joburg. But nothing was serious. I didn't care. I didn't care about me. I didn't care about my family. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about anything except what you think of me. That mattered. I cared. My ego was big, and I had a reputation to uphold, and that reputation was the bad girl. And I did it well. I also, sorry, because this is an important part of my journey. In primary school, I started cutting. I found self-mutilation as a great sense of escape for me. And it went also all hand in hand with the using. It was another escape. I didn't know how to feel normal feelings. I didn't know how to process normal feelings. And cutting for me was, I could feel it, I could heal it, I could take care of it. I was very clinical with it as well. Like, I nursed my cuts. I had Savlon and whatever, and I was disgusting. Like I was a using addict, but I took care of my wounds. Because I couldn't heal me, so I healed this. I think I was about 16 when I first found the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, also through another psychiatric, let's try and fix her. Let's fix her with more drugs. There's something really wrong, let's fix her. And I'll never forget my first meeting. The treatment center said you don't have to introduce yourself as an addict, but you do need to just sit and listen. They did a round-robin introduction where you say, hello, my name is Laura, I'm an addict, and it goes around. And when it got to me, I was just like, I'm Laura. And not even halfway through that meeting, I knew I was, for the first time in my life, sitting in a room with people that I could relate to. There was something in that meeting. Okay, it took a few years after that of me being special and different, but there was something in that meeting that kept me coming back. There was hope. There was life in people's eyes. I thought everyone was a big fat liar as well, because I didn't think that it was possible. And also I was much worse than everybody else, all that junkie pride nonsense, they were different. And I was so young, and that kept me going, because I was so young, and I was like, I'm young, I'm living my life. But I didn't want to go party. I didn't want to go jaw. I wanted to die and escape. That's the difference. I wanted to die. I saw no hope in this world but in these meetings. I saw the hope that I couldn't find on my own through hearing people talk about that insecurity stuff, the fear stuff, the rejection stuff, the resentment stuff, and I could understand it, I could feel it, and I could relate. I think the biggest spiral happened for me after I found these rooms. Going out and using once you know that there's a solution fucks your using up big time. Because prior to finding Narcotics Anonymous, I didn't think there was a solution. I didn't think there was an answer. I didn't think there was any way that I could live a normal life. I didn't want to. But then there was. Then there were people, and I listened to stories of things that I could relate to, and they were doing it. Like I said, it took me a few years after that of in and out and relapse and collecting chips and coming back in. And I started hustling in meetings, and it was just it was so low, but here was Laura, young and trying, and it was all bullshit. It was bullshit. When I finally reached the bottom was when my drug of choice had taken me to the streets, and I had nothing. I didn't have a toothbrush. My mom had changed the locks to her house, and I was on the streets of Hillbrow, and I was okay with it. The addict in me I almost romanticized the streets, which is so fucked. But and I was trying to get clean because, like I said, I knew that there was something more. I could see it. I still just couldn't grasp it. But I couldn't. I had the desperation. I share about this often, about desperation. Desperation is something I've always had. Like I shared at the beginning, desperate for people's approval, desperate for this, desperate for friends, desperate for my boyfriend not to leave me. Meanwhile, most of the time I was bored of them on the bike. But I knew desperation. I was desperate for my drugs. The things that I did to get my drugs went against every moral compass that was ever taught to me or ever, come to me from a godly place. And the day I cleaned up, on the 27th of November 2008, I was 20 years old, and I was in my car, 4 o'clock, I'm guessing, in the morning, sitting on the edge of my car with the door open, rolling a cigarette with Stompies in newspaper. And I was, at 5 o'clock the security came. I used to park outside of McDonald's. There was a parking lot over there. At least it was kind of safe. And so it was before the security came, and that was what I'd do. And then I'd hustle. I'd move my car, because most of the time I didn't have petrol, to hustle with my car. I'd move my car and I'd hustle, or I'd steal, or I'd do other stuff to get money. And I sat there, and because, like I said, this program saved my life long before I chose it, which goes to that reading. Before I chose it, it saved my life. It planted a seed. And I'm going to get emotional now. Sorry. I sat there on the edge of my car rolling the cigarette, and it wasn't me that said this. It was God. It was the universe. It was all the hugs that I'd received in these meetings. It was the people that loved me doing their 12th step. It was those voices said to me, Laura, this is not the life I had planned for you. And I would never have got there on my own, because I hated myself. I hated everything about me. And thank God I reached out. Thank God for all these little sayings keep coming back. Don't give up till the miracle happens, just for today. Because that is what got me 1 day clean, 2 days clean, 3 days clean, was all these little things that we hear in every meeting. And I reached out for help to a couple of members that had said to me, Laura, are you done? And I always said yes, but I never was. And I always went back out there. And I reached out for help. My treatment was sponsored, and I owe my life to those people. There were about 5 or 6 people, one of which he actually committed suicide about 2 years ago, also to this disease, because his disease manifested in a different area, not substance, but a different area, and he wasn't working a program. But there were about 5 people that put money together and sponsored my treatment. All the government places were fully booked, and they weren't booking anybody till after the festive season. And these people knew that if they didn't get me into treatment, I would die, either by my own hands or on the streets. And they said to me, Laura, because now they'd seen me in and out, in and out, in and out. They said, right, how willing are you? We know you're desperate. We can fucking see how desperate you are when you're sitting in a meeting with blood all over you and you smell. We know you're desperate, but how willing are you? And I said, I don't know. Because at that point, and I love that I got to a point where I didn't know, because my whole fucking life, and even now, sometimes I know. And that's my biggest problem, is I don't know. And they said, right, we've got to make plans, and we've got to get this money together and speak to the treatment center and blah, blah, blah. It might be this afternoon, it might be next week. But if you stay clean and don't pick up until we've got the money together and we've got your bed, we will sponsor you treatment. And it took 11 days. 11 days. I don't know if they had the money before then. They probably did. But 11 days I detoxed with no meds, cold turkey, and again, couch surfed from one addict to another. I think I did about 19 meetings. In Joburg, there's so many meetings. I did about 19 meetings in those 11 days, and I sat clucking in the meetings because I didn't know if I could stay clean, but I knew that I couldn't fucking use anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. I was done. And, when they said, okay, right, I got a call from another member who's no longer around, and she phoned me and she said, right, are you ready? Pack your bags. I was like, I don't have any. And at that point, that for me was my first major choice of, do I choose solution or do I choose disease? Because now I'm like kind of through the withdrawal. I'm going to meetings. I'm getting there one day at a time. But I knew that stopping that wasn't even the beginning of it. I had to learn how to stay stopped, and the only way to do that was to get myself into treatment and finally look at me. And I went in, and it was so hard because I didn't feel like I deserved it. I didn't feel, I didn't know. I didn't know if I was going to make it. I didn't know if I could get through the next hour. Nothing seemed possible for me. But I went in, and the treatment center were incredible, and I owe my life to them as well, because after that first month, they worked out payment plans, and I stayed in the halfway. And then I went from halfway and I went to sober house, which we don't have down here, but it's pretty much the same thing. It's just with a little bit more freedom. So I slowly integrated myself back into life. I mean, I had nowhere to go. My family wanted nothing to do with me. My first year, my family were not involved at all. My mom took me for coffee the day after my first year, and she gave me one of the sugar sachets with a little message, and the message said, if there's a way to do it better, find it. And I was like, so just to give you an example of how doubtful my family was of me, and they were not a part of my life. And I got to my first year by doing this rigorously, fellowship and meetings and surrounding myself with people in the solution. And like I look now and it's 11 years. And I didn't know if I could get through the first 11 hours. I know I've spoken a lot, I've rambled. I didn't want to think about this meeting. The fellowship, I always say this, is that the fellowship saved my life, and the program saves my life, because there's always going to be something in my behavior or in my surroundings, life on life's term stuff, that I will be back at a point where do I choose solution or do I choose addiction or disease? And I've reached that place many, many times in my recovery. The men's stuff, the relationship stuff, is something that I've battled with up to this day. Either choosing toxic, codependent, abusive, neglectful relationships, or, choosing a relationship when I'm not ready for a relationship because I'm still hurting from the one before. I don't want to say it was easy to not pick up once I cleaned up, because I can remember sitting in treatment literally holding onto the chair so I didn't fucking run away. But I don't think that was to use. I think that was to choose to live. Because I knew that if I went out, it was to kill myself. But my disease it's a cunning, baffling, and powerful thing. And I have cross-addicted to gym, to food, to work, to over-parenting. I don't know if that's possible, but there was a stage in my recovery where that was my obsession and my compulsion was just my children, and I neglected myself. Those moms that just let go of themselves when they have a baby and they don't brush their hair? I was like that, because all I did was, I battle with balance. When there's something in my life that fulfills me in some way, all my focus goes on there, and it's about finding the balance. And I can't find the balance if I don't have my pillars. I'm so grateful that I got the foundation that I did in my early recovery, even though I wasn't perfect, and even though my disease manifested in different areas. From the day that I chose this, there's a saying, I don't know, NA is not for the chosen few, it's for the few who choose. And I believe that on the 27th of November 2008, I chose this for the first time. I chose life, I chose solution, I chose to not die for the first time. And I've had to re-choose that every day. My life is full and wonderful and beautiful, and I've got blessings. I became a mom in recovery. Like I said, I cleaned up really young, so I didn't have a life. And now I have a life, and it comes with all sorts of curveballs. And I've lost jobs, and I got married, and I got divorced, and I had to run away from a country with my children because my ex-husband was using. Like, I've had crazy, chaotic, insane, a lot of them on my own doing and my own choices, because I don't always get it right, and I'm very, very self-willed. But life on life's terms has given me lessons and blessings, and this last year has been, I think, one of my biggest growth years on a personal level, because I've had to face a lot of things. I got given incredible blessings this year. I was in a relationship, a brief relationship, that when it ended, I was so hurt and I was so distraught. But through working my program around it, I think it was God's way of saying, there are good guys out there, just wait. You get better first, and then I will give you a good guy. And that's my focus now. Like, I don't even hug people anymore. And my focus this year, or this last part of this year, has been trying to get well again. Because I don't need substance to take me to a dark place. I don't need substance to get me to a place where I don't like the person in the mirror. I don't need substance to create insane thinking in my head. I can do that all on my own through behavior. My children are and always will be my number one gift of recovery. Along with me, I found Laura, that little girl that ran and hid in the garden. I found her, and I've given her a chance at a life, because I am neither as awful as my disease tells me, nor as great. I am fully aware of my assets and defects, and I'm really grateful to sit here and feel as anxious as I am to share, because that never goes away. I am happy to be in the skin that I'm in. I'm happy to have the things that I have and the things that I don't have, because they will come. Like a job again. But that's life on life's terms. I have incredible people in my life today. I've got friends that are real and genuine, and they will call me out on my shit. And they will also laugh in the faulty, banter. But everything today in my life holds weight. Everything in my life today means something. And everything in my life today, I must be quiet. Thank you. Everything in my life today is mine. Good, bad, and ugly. It's all mine, and I'm just really grateful to be alive and to be a part of the solution. So welcome to anybody who is new to this fellowship and these meetings and these rooms. I hope that something I said, if anything that I've said today, I hope that it is a message of keep coming back, because it is possible and we do recover. Thanks for letting me share.